When was the last time you talked to or saw Dave, and what did you guys talk about?
It was 3 months before he died. We were on the road out in California. We were on the bus, and Dave appeared to be doing really well, singing great, playing great, and his wife, Linda, had uterine cancer.
Jeez.
And apparently, and apparently she'd passed out at home, and one of the kids called Dave, and she'd been left like on the bathroom floor for God knows how many hours, and Dave had to go home, and that was the end of that. That was the last time I saw Dave. I talked to him from time to time. I talked to him about a week before he died, and he said he was, he wasn't feeling all that good, but and then his daughter called me the morning that Dave passed. So it was, it was a hard time.
Well,
and I went to the funeral. It was the first time I'd ever been able to actually talk. I couldn't talk at my father's funeral. I couldn't talk about my mother's funeral. It was like I just couldn't talk. But I had no choice here, because Dave and I were like, I had to get up and talk about it.
Well, you guys were like brothers.
Yeah, and I made people laugh as well, because I told the upside of Dave.
Well,
Instead of dwelling on what he'd been through for the last 10 years, I told stories and made everybody laugh.
You're the last original member in the current touring band, and you've been the one that's been there the whole time. What does that role mean to you, not only as a performer, but also the ambassador of that band?
I have a great manager, and she keeps me in line, and she points out if I'm going off to the wrong side, and she keeps me in line about how to sort of perform my function. I don't have a problem playing. I mean, I'm great with that, but sometimes with the business, when you're working with everybody, we're tight. We hang out together, we go out together, we make records together, and sometimes it can be a little difficult. I don't particularly enjoy that side of it. I'd rather just be the drummer, but sometimes basically it's something that I have to do, and I do it to the best of my ability and try to be fair and listen.
Yeah. Well, it's that thing. I mean, you know, some of those songs are so iconic. I mean, especially with Slow Ride, it's got to be what goes through your body and your mind every time you start off with that drum intro.
I wrote that.
How did that song come about?
Bang. It came from a jam. Rod and I used to own a house out on Long Island. Tony Stevens had just been asked to leave once again in 1974. And I was living up in Woodstock, in New York, upstate New York, and I was real good friends with Nick Jameson. Nick Jameson was the head engineer at Bearsville Records, and he produced a couple of records for us and played on our first album and stuff. And we were tight. We would play. We were playing back then. We were playing tennis and stuff like that, and we would go out and jam at some of the local clubs up in Woodstock. And anyway, after Tony was fired one more time, I said to Nick, you want to play bass? And Nick said, yeah. He played bass apparently in his first band, so we rented a bass for him, drove down from Woodstock to Long Island, and we played in the basement of mine and Rod's house out in Rocky Point on Long Island. Yeah. And it was just from a jam. We were jamming, and the whole arrangement was done there and then. And then Dave said after we'd done the arrangement, and we recorded it on cassette players back then, and Dave said, I've got some words. Dave apparently, and at the time, Dave told our manager when the songs were put together that he'd written the song, whereas in fact he didn't really write it. You don't have to put this down because I don't think it's really particularly relevant. But Nick Jameson arranged everything and wrote all the middle part and all the changes in it, and Rod certainly had a huge part in the song. And I wrote the beginning, but I don't know if that means I was a co-writer.
Well, it's one of those things I've told people that you can tell a good rock and roll station if they play the full version of Slow Ride or they play the edited version.
Right. And when we were mixing the song, it was just myself and Nick Jameson were mixing it up in Sun Trailer Studios up in up in Vermont on a mountaintop. And we finished mixing that and a couple of other songs that were on the Fall for the City album. We came down to Woodstock. We went straight to the studios there, or rather the offices, and Paul Fishkin, who was the in charge of Bearsville Records, and we played it for him, and he said, well, you can't have an 8-minute single. And Nick and I both said to him, fuck you, yes we can. and we put it out as the full-length version, but eventually we had to succumb, and I think Nick actually preferred to edit it himself as opposed to letting the radio stations just shut it off.
I hate it when the radio stations do the 4-minute version.
Yeah. Don't you hate that?
Well, Foghat's 46 years old this year. What does that number mean to you?
The year I was born. I don't know. I don't really think about that so much. Every time I finish another studio album, I say, that's it, we're not doing any more. I've already started on a new one. But, because, you don't make any money from making records, and the last studio album we did, Under the Influence, we used a producer on that, Tom Hambridge, who was an absolute fucking gem. Really, really cool guy, and it was really, really enjoyable working with him, and making the record with him. I think it's certainly it's really good because he had a large influence on it, and also Brian Bassett, was able to just play guitar and put his influence on the music as opposed to having to mix it, record it, and do everything like that, which I think I know was a good idea. So it was worth it. And working with Tom Hambridge, he's a genius. Yeah. He was absolutely brilliant to work with. And I've worked with a dozen different producers, and he is certainly one of the best. He's way up there.
Well, my final question is, what is a life creating music and touring and seeing the world? What does that touch about what it means to be a human being?
Oh dear, it's a bit deep. I think as a human being, I've got better. I think it's important that I think I've got a lot better. I'm a lot more caring. I'm a lot more thoughtful, about other people than I ever used to be. I know that. And not that I was ever really, but you can, when you're young, you can be a bit careless.
Yeah.
And with your words and with your the way you treat people, and especially ones that you claim to have loved. But I've got better at that, and I have to thank my wife for that. She's actually sort of made me a much better human being, I think.
Yeah. I
think I told her that once. I said, I'm a much better man for loving you. So yeah, that would be it. I think I'm a better human being. I think I treat people with a little bit more care and thought, and I try to listen to them as opposed to, rabbit on and talk over them. I try to listen to other people.